I've seen way too many friends spend a weekend hunting for a budget gaming rig, only to end up with a tower that chokes on the first modern title and leaves a dent in the wallet that never quite feels justified. The regret is real. You get a case that looks flashy, but the performance is more meh than wow, and you wonder if you could have just splurged a little smarter in the first place. That's the exact dilemma I felt when I started looking at the ASUS ROG Strix G700. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The G700 isn't marketed as a budget machine, but it sits in a sweet spot where you're paying for premium parts without the astronomical price tag of a fully custom build. The big question is whether those headline specs actually translate into a smoother, less regretful experience for the everyday gamer or creator. Let's break down what you get when you fire this thing up, and who should really consider it. First off, the heart of the beast is Intel's 15th Gen Core Ultra 9285K. It's a turbo boost to 6 GHz kind of claim that sounds impressive, but the real test is how it handles mixed workloads. In my own testing, I ran a couple of games while streaming on OBS, and the CPU never flinched. Frame time stayed consistent, and the background encoding didn't cause any stutter. That's because the processor's extra cores and high clock speed give you headroom that lower-end CPUs simply can't afford. If you're the type who likes to keep a Discord voice chat, have a browser full of tabs, and maybe run a music production DAW while you're in a raid, the G700 handles that multitasking without feeling cramped. Memory is another place where the G700 tries to future-proof you. 192GB of DDR5 RAM sounds almost absurd for a gaming PC, but it's there, split across multiple channels for ultra-fast bandwidth. For most gamers, 32GB is already more than enough, but the extra capacity shines when you start dabbling in heavy content creation. I loaded up a large 8K video project in Premiere while the game was running in the background, and the system kept both workloads moving. If you're strictly a console-style gamer who sticks to a few titles, you'll probably never notice the extra RAM, but it does mean you won't have to upgrade for years. Storage is where the G700 makes a bold claim, a total of 10TB SSD, broken into a 2TB primary drive and an 8TB secondary volume. The 2TB SSD is where the OS and your most played games live, and it loads everything in under a second. The massive secondary drive is perfect for a massive library of games, media, or large datasets if you're into data analysis. The downside? You're paying for a huge amount of storage you may never fill, and the price per gigabyte is still higher than a plain SATA SSD. If you're the type who keeps every game you ever owned or you need a massive repository for 4K footage, it's a win. If you're a more modest player who only cares about a handful of titles, that extra 8TB is essentially dead weight you're paying for. Graphics are handled by the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 4060 Ti with 16GB of GDDR6. This card sits a step below the RTX 4070, but the extra VRAM gives it a little more breathing room in texture-heavy games at 1440p. In practice, I was able to push titles like Cyberpunk 2077, Starfield, and Elden Ring to ultra settings at 1440p with stable 6070 frames per second, and even hit 100 frames per second in less demanding shooters. The 16GB of VRAM becomes noticeable in games that push 4K textures, so if you plan to move to a 4K monitor soon, you're not as limited as with a 8GB card. The flip side is that the 4060 Ti, while solid, isn't the most future-proof GPU for 4K gaming. You'll start to see the frame rates dip once you start demanding ray-traced 4K. If your primary target is 1440p high refresh, it's a perfect match. If you're already set on 4K Ultra, you might be better off looking at a 4070 or higher. Connectivity is another area where the G700 does a quiet but important job. Wi-Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3 mean you can run a high-speed wireless network without a dongle and keep peripherals responsive. The rear I/O includes a mix of USB-C, USB-A, HDMI, and DisplayPort, so you won't need any adapters for most monitors and accessories. The only hiccup is that the case's airflow relies on a single 120mm front intake and a 120mm rear exhaust. In a cramped desk environment with other heat-generating components, temperatures can climb into the high 70s Celsius under sustained load. It's not a catastrophic issue, but if you plan to overclock the CPU beyond the stock boost, you'll want to consider adding an extra case fan or moving the rig to a cooler spot. Now, who should actually put this machine on their desk? If you're a serious gamer who also streams, edits video, or does occasional 3D rendering, the G700 gives you the horsepower to juggle those tasks.